वीर्यवान् रावणं प्रेक्ष्य हृष्टात्मा युद्धाय समुपागमत् सर्वयत्नेन महता वधे तस्य धृतोऽभवत् अथ रविरवदन्निरीक्ष्य रामं मुदितमनाः परमं प्रहृष्यमाणः निशिचरपतिसंक्षयं विदित्वा सुरगणमध्यगतो वचस्वरेति इति आदित्यहृदयं सम्पूर्णम्.
Thank you very much, Shrukriti and Narayana. Namaste, everybody. First, we will have Sureshji share his poem with all of us. And then Sri Ramji will demonstrate, and he will tell us how to do the different posture, different, and he will teach us how to do the Surya Namaskara. He will demonstrate and walk us through the steps today. And then on Yoga Day, we are really fortunate. Sri Ramji will teach us, and we can follow along on 21st. We will share a link and everything on the groups. So please be prepared to join that class. For now, Sureshji, you can share the poem. Thank you.
Yeah, hello, Shilpaji. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
Yes, you're audible. And you have the permission to share screen as well.
Shilpaji, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. I'm actually connected as on 2 devices. So maybe if you could give me on my computer.
Sure. I can do that. I actually don't see the other device. Do you have it under a different name, maybe?
Yeah, it just says Suresh Srinivas.
Oh, yes, I see it. Yes, Sureshji, you should have permissions now.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, and thank you, everyone. Namaste. Let me know if you can see my screen. Yes. Okay. Thank you all for the opportunity. It's an honor. So this poem came about after Dr. Sriram Sarvottamji's first introductory class and couple of classes of Dr. Raju. It's called Sun Salute. So I'll read it, and you can follow along here if you like. Let us salute the sun, the source of all energy, vitality, and activity, rising each day without fail, playing peekaboo with the earth, filling the sky with delightful, vibrant colors as it departs for the night. Let us salute the sun, who was taught the ultimate knowledge by that Supreme and transmitted in a continuous succession until it was lost. Let us salute the sun, who was taught the ultimate knowledge by the Supreme and transmitted in a continuous succession until it was lost. I seem to have missed a paragraph. Just as the sun illuminates everything it touches, so too the salutes create the energy to illuminate the self within. Each movement carefully scripted, bowing from the mind, the head, and the spirit. Let us salute the sun just once a minute, every day. Even 108 is not enough for all the sun does for the earth and its beings. Thank you. Over to you, Dr.
Thank you so
Sriram.
much, Sureshji, for the wonderful poem. Sri Ramji, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful rendition of the Aadithya Hrudayam. And also, what a beautiful poem, Sureshji. I really enjoyed. You captured the essence of the Surya Namaskara so beautifully in very beautiful words to pay our appreciation, our gratitude to the sun. So I thank everyone for once again giving me the opportunity to talk about the Surya Namaskara, the sun salutation, and this time as a lecture demonstration. So I'm going to do a little demo. So last week, I just walked all of us through the practice of sun salutation, how it came about. Surya Namaskara is, of course, the mantra is based on the Vedas, Yajur Veda. And then the practice of sun salutation as we do today in yoga studios, for example, or in our personal sadhana, daily sadhana, is relatively recent, about 100 years old. And one of the pioneers of this practice, the legendary yogi, also regarded as the father of contemporary yoga, or father of modern yoga. Tomorrow is the Father's Day. So it's very apt that we remember him, Sri Krishnamacharya. So he architected this practice, the Surya Namaskara practice. So I'm going to demonstrate this practice and I will walk us through the various parts, each of the 12 postures, talk about this a little bit more, how to align our breathing with the practice of the postures as well. We will go through that as well. So before I start with the demo, I just want to remind ourselves, what is the Namaskara? So this is a complete Namaskara, Sashtanga Namaskara. Sa Ashtanga Namaskara. That means there are 8 parts to this Namaskara, and each of these parts are present in the Surya Namaskar that we will see today. So what are the 8 parts? A quick review that we looked at last week. So the 8 parts are Manasa. That means we are offering our Namaskara with our mind. Manasa, that is the first one. And then Vachasa, with our words. As we will see, the practice of Surya Namaskara also has mantras. So we speak the mantra, we chant the mantra out loud. It is an integral part of the Surya Namaskara practice. So Manasa, Vachasa, and then Drishtya, with our eyes. We face the sun when we practice the sun salutation. Traditionally, facing the east, looking at the rising sun, so our gaze is fixed on the rising sun. So Manasa, Vachasa, Drishtya, and then Karabhyam, with our hands. So using our hands, we are offering the salutations to the sun. Padbhyam, with our feet, and then Janubhyam, with our knees. So Manasa, Vachasa, Drishtya, and there are 2 more which escape my mind right now, but if anyone remembers, you can speak up. Manasa, Vachasa, Drishtya, Urasa, which is with our heart center, with our chest, with the trunk of the body. Urasa, Manasa, Vachasa, Urasa, and there's one more, and it'll come to my mind.
Shirasa.
Yes. How can I forget that? Shirasa, which is with bowing down with our head. Manasa, Shirasa, Urasa, Vachasa, Drishtya, and then Padbhyam and Karabhyam and Janubhyam, with our knees. So when we look at the Surya Namaskara practice, when I do the demo, you will see all of these aspects are contained within it. It is a complete Namaskara, Ashtanga Namaskara. It is a complete practice of gratitude, expression of gratitude to the sun, Namaskara to the sun. And as I mentioned last time, it is a complete exercise as far as the physical benefits to the body is concerned. All the major muscles, all the major joints of the body. Of course, sun salutation is much more than a mere physical exercise. But even if we don the perspective that it is an exercise for the body, it is a complete exercise. All the major muscles, all the major joints, all the major internal organs of the body are all exercised. We are bringing vitality to the whole system. And as we will see, the practice itself, one round of Surya Namaskara takes about 1 minute to 2 minutes, or perhaps 3 minutes if you're doing it very slowly. And in fact, my teacher used to recommend to do the practice very slowly. And I'll demonstrate in a few moments. So when we do the practice in a meditative manner, slowly by chanting mantras, it takes about 1 to 3 minutes, depending on the pace. And within this short time, we are exercising the whole body. And by combining the breath work as well, by uniting the rhythm of the breath with the rhythm of the body movements, breath-body synchronization, it also becomes a pranayama. So we are regulating the prana, regulating the breath, we are controlling the rhythm of the breath. Patanjali says in the Yoga Sutras that tasmin sati shwasha prashwasha yoho gati vicheda pranayamaha. Shwasa prashwasa, the in-breath and the out-breath, gati, the pace, the rhythm, we are controlling. Vicheda means to break the normal rhythm and to re-establish a new rhythm in the breath is the practice of pranayama. And it is an integral part of Surya Namaskara. And then, of course, it is a manasa. It is with the mind. We are also engaging the mental faculties. We are honoring the sun, and we are engaging all our the chitta, and then the ahamkara, and the buddhi, all the antakaranas are engaged in the practice. And finally, we're engaging the spirit. In other words, we are engaging our whole of our being. The core of who we are is participating in this practice. That is why it is also, in fact, it is primarily a spiritual practice. We are engaging the core of who we are, not just a mechanical practice, but we are elevating this from a mere physical exercise to that of a spiritual discipline, a prayer. And this is truly what Surya Namaskara is about. So what I will do now, I will begin by demonstrating one round of the sun salutation, Surya Namaskara, with the mantras. And then we will do analysis, each and every posture. Let us explore a little bit. And the whole presentation, perhaps I'm targeting about 15 minutes. And after that, we will open up for any questions and any comments or any sharing that you may have. So allow me to begin the practice of Surya Namaskara. So in Surya Namaskara, the first asana, the first practice is Samasthiti. We are standing with the feet together, balancing the weight of the body on both feet equally. That's why it's called the Samasthiti, the state of equilibrium. And with the hands in prayer position, Namaskara Mudra. And let me begin the Surya Namaskara. By the way, I'm facing the direction of the sun. So I made sure that the direction and the drishti, the gaze is towards the sun, which is west, because we are practicing in the evening now. Om Mitraya Namaha. Om Ravaye Namaha. Om Suryaya Namaha. Om Bhanave Namaha. Om Khagaya Namaha. Om Pushne Namaha. Om Hiranyagarbhaya Namaha. Om Marichaye Namaha. Om Aadityaya Namaha. Om Savitre Namaha. Om Arkaya Namaha. Om Bhaskaraya Namaha. So this completes one round of the Surya Namaskara. There are 12 postures, and each posture has a corresponding mantra. So each mantra is a name for the sun. Om Mitraya Namaha. Mitra is one of the names of the sun, a friendly mass of light. And then Om Ravaye Namaha, the radiant one, etc. There are 12 names for the sun. Now, this is a universal practice. Everybody in the yoga world does it. Beginning student of yoga, they learn it in the first class. Even advanced practitioners or adept yogis who have been practicing for a very long time, the Surya Namaskara is a very integral part of the practice. So it's a universal discipline. Everyone does Surya Namaskara. And there are minor variations across the disciplines, across different traditions of yoga. But the core essence is the same. It's a way to honor the sun. Now let us look at each of the postures individually. So let's start with the first posture. As I mentioned before, this is the Samasthitihi, the posture of equilibrium. The weight of the body is perfectly balanced on both feet. And then we join the hands in prayer position. Palms are together and the hands are close to the heart center. There are various names for this hand position. It is called Namaskara Mudra, also called Anjali Mudra, where when we are bringing some flowers to offer to the divine, so we're holding the flowers in our hands. That is how Sri Krishnamacharya used to refer to the Anjali Mudra. My heart is full of gratitude and I want to offer flowers to the lotus feet of the divine. So with that attitude, Anjali Mudra. So this is the first posture. The second posture is a back bend. You'll notice in the Surya Namaskara, there are complementary postures. For every back bend, there is a forward bend. For every strengthening practice, there is a stretching practice. So when we look at it from a physical, the body perspective. So the second posture is actually a back bend. And it's a standing back bend. In fact, it's a little intermediary asana or even advanced. If the back bend with continued practice of yoga with years of practice, we can go very much back. And so beginning students of yoga, perhaps they can look up at the sky. So simple back bend. And with continued practice, we can go all the way as much as it is comfortable. And then come back to center. And you will notice, especially in back bends, the chanting of the mantra becomes a challenge because in back bends, there is a choking feeling. You'll notice perhaps when you try back bend, you can try this posture later when the stomach is empty. And you will discover if you want to say something, there's a choking feeling. It is a little more challenging, a little more difficult to chant out the mantra loud. Now, if you are able to bring strength to our respiratory apparatus, strength to the voice box, so that even in this back bend, we are able to chant the mantra out loud, it is a powerful exercise for voice culture. Musicians, they practice this all the time, especially in the Surya Namaskar, especially in back bends. So it's a very powerful practice. The mantra associated with this second posture is Om Ravaye Namaha. So when we arch back, Om Ravaye Namaha. And then the third posture. So the third posture is a forward bend. So we see this complementary postures, back bend and now a forward bend. The third posture, the mantra is Om Suryaya Namaha. Bending forward, it's called Padahastasana. So let me mention the names of the asanas as well. The previous posture, the back bend, is called Ardha Chakrasana, half wheel posture. And the third posture is Padahastasana. And in some traditions, they call it Hastapadasana. And in some other traditions, they also call it the Uttanasana. That means the stretching posture. If you do this posture, you will discover there's a nice exhilarating stretch along the back of the legs, the hamstring muscles and the calf muscles. And the mantra associated is Om Suryaya Namaha. So it is like this. So we came out of the back bend and then we bend forwards all the way down as far as it is comfortable to you. Now, initially, it may be a little difficult to touch the ground without bending the knees. But with continued practice, you will discover maybe tomorrow when you practice a little bit more, we are able to go. And with each week's practice, we can go all the way down. It's an exhilarating stretch. Padahastasana. The fourth posture, we bring one leg back and look up. This posture is called Ashwashanchalanasana, which means the horse rider posture or equestrian pose. Ashwashanchalanasana. And it's a nice practice, nice exercise as a hip opener. And this is especially beneficial if you want to sit for long periods of time in one of the classic meditative postures. For example, when we sit for meditation, and if the body is not cooperating, perhaps the hips are stiff, then it becomes very uncomfortable to sit for long periods of time. And a few minutes into the meditation, we become very keenly aware of the discomforts of the body. So it opens up the hip joints, In fact, to sit for long periods of time, it's good to open up the hips, open up the hip joints, knees, and the ankles. And in fact, Surya Namaskara provides the opportunity to do that. So the Ashwashanchalanasana, we give a nice hip opening experience. And then the fifth posture is Ashwashanchalanasana, fourth posture. The fifth posture, this is called Dandasana. Dandasana means stick pose, stick or a staff posture. Here the body is like an inclined plane. The head, pelvis, and the feet are collinear. Now, this is a great exercise for strengthening the muscles of the arms and in general, muscles of the upper body. And you will notice, if you practice this, you will discover, although it looks easy, it is a little bit challenging. It requires strength along the arms as well as in the deep core muscles. We need core strength to hold this posture. The deep core muscle, especially the transverse abdominis. So this posture strengthens the core, deep core muscles. And the mantra associated here is Om Khagaya Namaha. And then the next posture, lowering the knees to the ground, shoulders and chest to the ground, Om Pushne Namaha. Now, this posture, what I just demonstrated, is actually a simplified version. In the classic sequence, from the Dandasana, in the classic sequence, the next posture is actually Chaturanga Dandasana. Here we bend the elbows and bring the body flat and parallel to the ground. Om Pushne Namaha. So in the beginning, it's a little bit challenging to hold this posture. It's like a push-up. That's why this is an approximation. It's a simplified version. And then the next posture is another back bend. This is called the Bhujangasana. Om Hiranya Garbhaya Namaha. Bhujangasana, the cobra pose. Here, the arch is distributed throughout the spine. Every vertebra is contributing to the arch. And the next practice is the downward facing dog. Adhomukha Shvanasana. Downward facing dog. Om Marichaye Namaha. Now, this downward facing dog posture is one of the key postures in the yoga tradition, especially in Krishnamacharya tradition, like Vinyasa Krama, etc. Because the downward facing dog, the Adhomukha Shvanasana, lends itself to many practices that are called bandhas. Bandhas such as Mooladhara Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, and Jalandhara Bandha. So all these three locks or bandhas can be practiced very effectively in the Adhomukha Shvanasana, the downward facing dog posture. This posture also provides exhilarating stretch to the back of the legs, the hamstrings and the calf muscles, and it nicely lengthens the spine. It gives a experience of an axial extension. Axial extension. Many times when there is too much of compression along the vertebrae, then there is not enough space for the spinal nerves to emerge out of the spinal cord. So when the nerve impingement happens, or perhaps the intervertebral discs, they bear a lot of pressure, then this posture that provides axial extension helps relieve that excess pressure. So it's a very beautiful posture. And it's also one of the simple inverted postures because the level of the head is below the level of the heart. So we experience an increased circulation of blood to the head region. And as I mentioned before, in the Krishnamacharya tradition, we actually hold that posture for several breaths, and then we practice the bandhas, the Uddiyana Bandha, Mooladhara Bandha, and Jalandhara Bandha. And if you're curious to know what these bandhas are, that's a topic for another day. But this is a very powerful practice to lock the prana and to assimilate that prana and distribute it throughout the system. Rather than dissipating that prana, we are conserving it, locking the prana, and making efficient use of the prana. So that's what we do in the downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. And after Adho Mukha Svanasana, we unwind, we retrace the step back. So we come back to the Ashwa Sanchalanasana. Om Aadithya Namaha. And then Om Savitre Namaha. Again, the forward bend here. And then arching back. Om Arkaya Namaha. Om Bhaskaraya Namaha. The final posture, coming back to Samasthiti. So the first point, we started with Samasthiti, the Namaskara Mudra, Anjali Mudra, and we return to the same posture. So it is one full cycle, 12 postures in one cycle. This is one round of Surya Namaskara. So let me demonstrate one more time, and then I'll conclude this presentation. Om Mitraya Namaha. Om Ravaye Namaha. Om Suryaya Namaha. Om Bhanave Namaha. Om Khagaya Namaha. Om Pushne Namaha. Om Hiranyagarbhaya Namaha. Om Marichaye Namaha. Om Adityaya Namaha. Om Savitre Namaha. Om Arkaya Namaha. Om Bhaskaraya Namaha. And I just want to briefly mention, we can expand on this Surya Namaskara. As I mentioned last week, Surya Namaskara is one of the Vishesha Vinyasas. Vinyasas are a sequence of practices. Vinyasa, the word Vinyasa comes from the root word asti or as. The root word dhatu is as, means to be. And there are two prefixes. Ni plus asa becomes nyasa, means to place stably. Nitaram asaha, nyasa. And then vinyasa, vishesha nitaram asaha. That is what is vinyasa. Vinyasa means a very specially crafted sequence of practices that brings stability to the whole system. It is not a chaotic hodgepodge sequence. It's a well thought about, well crafted sequence. And these practices, such as Surya Namaskara, are called Vishesha Vinyasas. And these Vinyasas can be expanded as well. For example, we can do some variations starting from the Adho Mukha Svanasana, starting from the downward facing dog. And we can go to a sub-cycle of a sequence, 3 or 4 postures. Let me demonstrate one example of that. So when we are doing the downward facing dog, we can come back to the Dandasana, and then Chaturanga Dandasana, and then Urdhva Mukha Svanasana. This is the upward facing dog. And then back to the downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. So these 4 postures we can do in a cycle. So this is the plank pose, and then Chaturanga Dandasana, upward dog, downward dog. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And we repeat the cycle of 4 postures again and again and again. And you will notice it brings such an amazing strength to the upper body. It's a very active practice. So within the cycle of 12 postures, we can introduce little sub-cycles of postures. That is how we expand the practice. And there are various such sub-cycles. For example, starting from the Ashwashanchalanasana, which is the equestrian, the horse rider's pose, we can do a sequence of warrior postures, Virabhadrasana. So there are subsequence like that. So there are various creative ways in which we can expand the practice of Surya Namaskara. And lastly, I mentioned that Surya Namaskara is a Vishesha Vinyasa, and as part of Vishesha Vinyasas are various other practices also. For example, there is a practice called Ding Namaskara, where we honor the directions. So in Surya Namaskara, we honor the sun. In the Ding Namaskara, we honor the east direction, south, west, north, and then upper realms, and then the lower realms, the intermediary realms, and back to the heart. So all the directions we honor, we do namaskara to all the directions. That is another example of a Vishesha Vinyasa, and that's a topic for another day. So the point is that there are various such Vishesha Vinyasa, specially crafted sequence of postures that come under the umbrella of namaskaras. So Surya Namaskara, Ding Namaskara, etc. And there are many such sequences that were composed by Sri Krishnamacharya. So with this, allow me to stop here and let me open up for any questions.
Sharada and Shailendraji, you can ask the question.
Yeah, Doctor, thank you very much. I had 2 questions. One is when you do Surya Namaskara, so the breathing also, some people teach saying that when you do these poses, the breathing also is important. That is one. And second is, so if you have the lumbar disc herniation, that is L4, L5 level bulge, is it okay to do Surya Namaskara? These are the 2 questions, Doctor.
Yes, thank you for the questions. Let me start with the second one. Now, whenever there is any pre-existing condition for the body, it is always a good idea to check with the physician first, check with the doctor first. What are the postures that I should avoid, or what are the postures that I should modify? So especially for the lower back, in fact, for lower back conditions such as the herniation along the lumbar segment of the spine, it is very important to be very gentle in the forward bending postures. In fact, perhaps the physician might recommend to avoid forward bending postures. So we have to go around the forward bending postures to modify the sequence. And also, of course, to be careful in the back bends as well, but especially the forward bends. Now, there are many variations of the Surya Namaskara that simplify the practice so that everyone can benefit from the practice. For example, I've taught many courses for seniors, elderly people, and the practice of sun salutation can be done on a chair Surya Namaskara. So Surya Namaskara lends itself for everybody. So we have to make intelligently, we have to modify the practice so that it suits the body. We are not torturing the system. We are helping the system. So we need to be very skillful how we practice it. And going back to the first question about the breathing, and as you mentioned, the rhythm of the breath and the rhythm of the body movements are in perfect sync. In other words, there is a breath-body synchronization. And the general rule of thumb is each time you arch back, you breathe in. In other words, each time you expand, you breathe in. And each time you bend forwards or contract the body, you breathe out. And of course, when we chant the mantra, we are actually breathing out. When we are chanting, we are saying out loud, we are actually breathing out. So how do we interject the breathing in? Where does the breathing in come? Because we need to introduce intelligent pause during our practice of Surya Namaskara so that we can offer our in-breath. And maybe in the Tuesday session, we can learn how to do that. But you are right, the practice of breath-body synchronization is an integral part of the Surya Namaskara.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Shivaranjani ji, do you want to ask?
Namaste, Dr. Ji. While doing the Bhujangasana as a part of Surya Namaskar, initially you stretched the right leg back, and the second time you did the alternate left one. So is it the first, it needs to be the right and then the left, or anything is okay, left and then the right?
Yes, the order is not so critical as long as it is balanced. So each round, we alternate the leg that goes back. Now, there are some traditions of yoga that add one more layer of nuance to the practice. They actually examine the dominant nostril. So when we examine the breath through the left and right nostril, usually only one of the nostril carries dominant breath. In other words, more proportion of the breath. And depending on which of the two nostrils is dominant, we have to carry that leg back. So that is, in some traditions, they do that. But in general, bringing a balance to both legs, alternating right leg first and maybe left leg next, like that. It will bring a good balance.
When I tried multiple times, I won't be able to do and come to the correct posture when I stretch the left leg back. Is it because of my left nostril, the breathing is not dominant as the right one?
It could be a variety of reasons. For example, when I began the practice of yoga, I noticed that some postures I was able to do on the right side better than the left. And I remember my teacher told me, so at the time, I was a high school student, right? So my teacher told me this is happening because I always carry my backpack on my right shoulder.
Okay.
So there is an asymmetry, and that shows up in our yoga practice. And that's an excellent point, because as we do the practice of yoga, what we discover is all these subtle aspects, we become aware of it. There's a tiny bit asymmetry between the left and right sides of the body. Or perhaps when we are trying to do balancing postures, standing on right leg is easier than standing on left leg, perhaps, or the vice versa, you see. So we become keenly aware of all these subtle aspects of the body that we were not aware of before. So we are learning about our own body, mind, etc. with the practice of yoga. This is a practice called Swadhyaya, Swa-adhyayanam, self-study, studying about our own body, the condition of the body, studying about our mind, etc. So as we do all these practices, we become more, we become friends with the body. We get to know about our body and mind in a greater detail. Otherwise, the body is like a stranger. We ignore the body throughout the day, and our mind is focused on outside activities. But here's an opportunity to connect with the body, the mind, And all these little details will reveal itself to us.
And another question related to the Bhujangasana posture only. So you were aligned the feet and then both the palms in one straight line. I was able to see that. So is there anything like initially we won't be able to bring it to the right alignment, and then we might get in a after the couple of like a abhyasa, whatever you were suggesting. So is there any specific importance for this bringing all of them, all the three in the right alignment?
So you are right. In the first day of practice, it's very difficult to expect perfect alignment, right? It's like somebody is trying to play the violin. On the first day, you cannot expect perfect shruti. So it takes some time. The initial few days, there'll be some cacophony. And then after that, slowly it becomes melodious. So like that, the alignment will come in due course of practice. And to add a little bit more about keeping the feet together. So it's interesting that you observe that. So yes, in the Bhujangasana, especially the teaching tradition of Krishnamacharya. So he always used to emphasize to keep the feet together when we do the back bends, when we do arching of the back. And there's a reason for that. When we keep the feet together, it locks the coccygeal segment of the spine, the tailbone region. So it locks it. There is more stability there. Otherwise, you will notice the same practice of Bhujangasana, when you do it with the legs separated, it doesn't feel as stable, especially in the lower back. There's a little bit of loose movement. Whereas when you keep the feet together, there is more stability to the tailbone region, the coccygeal segment of the spine.
Thank you.
Pushpaji, you may ask your question.
Sorry, Shriramji, are you able to hear me?
Yes, Malikji.
Yes, I really appreciate. Thank you again for explaining each step very, very nicely. I have two questions. Actually, one is a comment. You were saying that how difficult it is to alternate the breathing. Like when we extend, we take a deep breath in. So I know you're going to do it at the later stage, but in a simplistic fashion, is it okay to chant the mantra first and then take the inspiration? Because it's very difficult to take inspiration and say, because we can only say the mantra when we are exhaling.
Yes, in fact, that is one of the practices that Krishnamacharya himself used to teach, especially the slow practice of sun salutation. Chant the mantra first and then go to the next posture. So that's an excellent way to do these practices. And to add a little more on that, I mentioned that whenever we expand or bend back, we inhale, and whenever we contract or bend forward, we exhale. That's the general rule of thumb. And this practice, where we expand the breath with the body and reduce the breath, in other words, breathe out with the contraction of the body, this practice is called Brahmana Kriya. Brahmana Kriya means we go along with the body, expand with the body, contract with the body. There is also opposite practice called Langhana Kriya, where when we bend back, we actually exhale. It may appear counterintuitive. Why do we do that? And sometimes it is needed. A couple of reasons. One is it could be because of therapeutic reasons. It may be difficult to bend back by inhaling. It might be easier to do it while exhaling. And the second reason is, especially when we do, for example, deep back bends, very deep back, like advanced back bending postures, initially, it is very difficult to go to the deep back bend with inhalation. It's very, very difficult. So we practice that first with exhalation, get comfortable in the posture, and slowly, so start with Langhana Kriya and then move on to Brahmana Kriya.
I see. Thank you. I have one more, if you don't mind. When we do Mariche Namaha, that is the downward dog posture, you said to hold the prana so that we can distribute the energy. Does it mean that we have to hold the breath for a few seconds so that we can do that?
So in the Krishnamacharya tradition, yes, we actually hold the downward dog for 3 breaths. And each time we breathe out, there is a pause in the breath. So the Bahya Kumbhaka, we breathe out and then hold the breath. And when we do the Bahya Kumbhaka, we apply the locks, the Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, and the Jalandhara Bandha. So that is one classic practice that is done. So yes, in some of the postures, we hold for some time. Now, throughout the practice, if you don't want to hold a posture, if you want to do it inhale, exhale, in the same flow of the breath, still there is one posture where we do hold the breath, which is the plank posture, the Dandasana, staff pose.
Dandas, yeah.
We actually hold the breath there.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you again, Sriramji.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I don't see any more raised hands. Suresh ji.
Yeah, that was wonderful, Dr. Sriramji. So I had a question about the Samasthiti. So in the Samasthiti, I couldn't see whether you're keeping your legs together or you're keeping them apart from your side posture. So what could you comment a little bit more on that? And then I had a second question, which is you also talked about food and doing it when the stomach is empty. I think you briefly mentioned it. So could you also comment some more about that? Thank you.
Yes, in fact, I broke the rule now. I had a late lunch and I realized that my sun salutation was a little bit more a struggle than when I do it in the morning. I hope it was not too obvious. So coming back to the first point, namely the feet together. In the classic practice, the feet are together. The big toes touch and the heels, the sides of the heels, they touch. So the feet are together. In the beginning, it may be a little bit difficult to balance the whole body in such a small space. So in the beginning, if the body is more stable when we separate the feet a few inches, that is okay as well. So one of the practice that we used to do in our yoga shala when I was learning from my teacher is to bring more stability in the samasthiti. What we do is we stand with the feet together and with the hands in the namaskara mudra and close our eyes and just remain there. Keep breathing and remain there for several minutes. You will discover how challenging it is to bring the body to a balance in that single spot. It looks very easy. In fact, many of the yoga postures, when we see the picture, oh, I can do it, it's very easy. But when we actually attempt it, we discover, oh, there is more detail there. There is more tapas that one needs to do. So what we find when we stand with the feet together, and especially when we close our eyes, what we discover is the body is making tiny movements. The balance is not 50-50, 50%, 50% on both feet. Slight adjustments the body is making. And in real time, the body's intelligence is correcting for that and bringing the balance. So it's a dynamic equilibrium. It's not a static equilibrium, it's a dynamic equilibrium. And for the dynamic equilibrium to happen, the mind has to be alert. If the mind is daydreaming or thinking about what am I having for lunch today, then the mind is distracted. It's very difficult to keep the balance there. So the mind has to be alert. It has to be with the body. And then the balance becomes more easy. In fact, the quality of balance is actually a reflection of how one-pointed the mind is. It is more for the mind. Balancing postures are more for the mind than for the body. So yes, in samasthiti, it is preferable to keep the feet together, the big toes touch.
Sorry, I wasn't able to unmute. Malik ji?
No, actually, I did ask. But I had a very quick comment, if it's okay with you, Sriramji, about the last
Sure.
thing. I'm not contradicting, but if someone has actually a balance problem when the eyes are closed, especially at the older age, it means that the joint sense is impaired in the feet. So when the eyes are open, they're able to compensate with their eyes open. But when they close the eyes, suddenly the compensation of the vision is lost. So this is typical of somebody in the night when they wake up from the bed and they want to use the restroom and there's no light. They tend to fall down because there's no balance. This is just a comment, nothing to do with the ashna, what Sriramji was saying, and about the mental ability to focus. But for these older folks, I think it's important that to have a bed light, and maybe they should check the B12 if the B12 levels are okay, or if they have diabetes, then it tends to cause even more problem. So it's a very common problem for elderly to just get up and then fall down. So I just wanted to add a comment. I'm sorry to deviate. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that very good point, Malikji. In fact, you are right. So especially any conditions with the vestibular system for the sense of balance, or another instance where we have to be careful is when we come out of forward bending posture back to the upright posture and then bending back towards the end of the sun salutation. When we stand back up, if the circulation of blood is not very brisk, then perhaps some students might experience dizziness in the mind. So the blood supply is not brisk enough to reach the brain. So there's a feeling of lightheadedness. Sometimes they even fall down. So we have to be careful for that. And there are ways in which we can protect ourselves from that experience where there's a sense of imbalance or trying to fall down. And one of the ways, for example, is whenever we do the standing arching back, it is always recommended to tighten the muscles of the legs. Tighten the muscles of the legs. What happens is, so from the Padahastasana, when we come up and then arch back, so if the blood circulation is not brisk, gravity is pulling all the blood to the lower extremities. Now, when we tighten the muscles of the legs, what happens is we are not allowing the blood to go to the lower extremities. We have closed, like we have contracted the blood vessels. So the blood has the opportunity to still circulate towards the head region. And in fact, this is a very common advice they give even for soldiers, for example, when they are standing in attention posture, and they have to stand for a very long time. Sometimes if the blood circulation is very, it's not very brisk, then perhaps we've seen some videos of the soldiers they plop, they just fall on the ground because they've been standing for a long time. And one of the advice they give for the soldiers is to keep the legs tight. Tighten the muscles of the legs when you stand in attention. So similar thing like that we can introduce. My teacher always used to give this advice. When you arch back, tighten the muscles of the legs. And also throughout the sun salutation practice, we keep the eyes open. Remember the Namaskara, one of the 8 parts of the Sashtanga Namaskara is Drishtya. Drishtya. So our gaze is open. We are seeing the sun, the early morning rising sun. So the practice of sun salutation is always done with the eyes open.
Thank you so much, Malikji, for the medical advice, and thank you, Sriramji, for telling about tightening the legs. Recently, this happened with my son. He was standing for a while and suddenly he collapsed and we didn't know what was going on. It makes total sense with what you're saying about the soldier. So personally, thank you for that bit of information. Malik, the other Malikji, you may ask your question now.
Non-medical Malik. Namaste, Sriramji. Thank you so much. I have a little bit of clarification to seek, especially in the connection of the Ashtanga Yoga in the eightfold, eight-limb yoga. You know, the asana comes first, then later on the pranayama comes, and then dhyana comes. So, but usually there is a complaint from several people who practice that after the asana, especially something that stretches a lot, your body is again, sweaty and all that. And I've just taken bath before this, and now again before meditation, should I take bath? But connecting the sequence of this, the sun salutations to pranayam to dhyana and meditation, can you give us your optimal recommendations of what is a practical sequence and one that fits the modern routine also? You have to go at some point to office.
That's a good question. How do we sequence our practices? Should we do asanas first or pranayama next and then inner practices? So this is what Krishnamacharya used to explain. Both ways are correct. You can either start from the outer and go inwards or the reverse. But what is recommended depending on what stage they are on the path of yoga? So for beginning students of yoga, it is best to go from the outward to the inner. Because start from the body. Because if we don't attend to the body, there is no way the body can sit comfortably for meditation. Because the body will be a big source of distraction with all its discomforts. So attend to the body first and then do pranayama. So first the body with asanas, etc. and Surya Namaskars. And then the pranayama to clear the mind. So the mind is not filled with tamas. The mind becomes clear with pranayama. And with a crystal clear mind, we enter meditation. So body has been attended to, mind has been attended to, and then it is fit for meditation now. Now, as we continue with the practice of yoga, the reverse becomes more preferable. Start with the inside first. Connect yourself within. Allow the mind to repose in the self and then offer the action outside. In fact, the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, Yogastha Kuru Karmani. Be established in yoga first and then express that yoga, express that harmony, let it radiate outwards. So let it radiate first to the mind and then to the prana and then to the body and then let it reach the world. So that is also very good practice. But then in order to connect in yoga, it is not very easy for beginning students, you see. So with years of practice, maybe we can start with meditation first and then pranayama and then asana. But usually for most people, the order of our daily practice, starting with the outer and reaching inwards, that is the most effective way. And also the Ashtanga yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga that Patanjali mentions in the Yoga Sutras, they are not 8 steps. He doesn't talk about step 1, step 2. That is why he uses the word anga. Anga means limbs, like the arms and the legs, the limbs of the body. So limbs of yoga. It is not that our right arm grows first and then the left arm grows next and then our leg grows. It's not like that at all. It's not a step-by-step process. All of the angas, they parallelly evolve, you see. So there is a parallel progression or evolution of our practice, asana, pranayama, dhyana. All these 8 angas of Ashtanga yoga, they progress in a parallel stream of evolution.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful to know. And do we usually take bath before doing the sun salutations, or just from a sanctity point when we are offering some prayer, it's common to first do the shower and then do the practice?
Yes, my teacher always used to insist. In Tamil, he used to say, Yoga Bhyasam Shiva Pujaik Samanam. In Tamil, that means the practice of yoga is it is a puja for Lord Shiva. So when we do the practice of puja, when we do the any sacred practice, spiritual practice, we always cleanse the body, cleanse the mind, cleanse the surroundings, and then do the practice. So we always shower first and then do the practice of asanas, etc. And with continued practice, we'll discover the sweating is not much at all. Maybe in the beginning, perhaps the body is not used to it. So there is a profusely the body might sweat, but only in the beginning. Later on, Krishnamacharya used to say, don't make the Surya Namaskara like an aerobic exercise. So with continued practice, what happens is we are not breathing very fast. And the heart becomes strong, that the stroke volume becomes high. In other words, with one pumping of the heart, with one heartbeat, it is able to supply a large quantity of blood. So the circulation is so strong that the heart doesn't need to beat rapidly to carry the same amount of oxygen throughout the body. With one pump of the heart, it is able to, the stroke volume is so high that it is able to fulfill the nutritional, the requirements, oxygen requirements of all the cellular community of the body.
Thank you, Shriramji. Looks like that's all the questions we have for today. I'll make one announcement for Yoga Day, and after that we can do the Aadithya Hrudayam chanting, Shriramji. If that is okay with you?
Certainly.
So for all the students who have attended class Aadithya Hrudayam, thank you for joining all 7 days and completing this course. And start on Yoga Day on 21st, Shriramji is going to teach us. He's going to walk us through all the sun salutation steps, and we will follow along with him. It'll be wonderful if all of you are able to join. The timings and details will be posted on the groups, but it is going to be from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. Pacific time, which will be 6:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. India time. All this information will be published in groups. We request every one of you to join us on Yoga Day to do sun salutations. Looks like Vidyaji has one more last question. Vidyaji, you can ask your question, and after that, Shriramji will recite Aadithya Hrudayam. We'll all follow along. We'll mute ourselves and follow along.
Shilpaji, I too had a question which I'll ask later. Just a quick one after this.
Sure. Vidyaji, you can ask.
Sorry, people with low BP, doctor, low BP and joint issues like lumbar and spondylitis and all that. Can we do this Surya Namaskaram poses because we feel giddy, from the front bending and the back bending? So
You are
yeah,
right.
for this, is there any other alternative or and breathing
Yes,
also?
we can modify.
Okay, we can modify.
So it's best to check with the physician, and there are ways in which we can modify. For example, you bring a good point about the low BP, and especially for low blood pressure. When we come out of the forward bending and when we want to do the next posture, arching of the back, the dizzy sensation might happen. And in fact, sometimes even a normal healthy person could experience low BP from time to time, especially, for example, if I fast every Ekadashi day. So on the next day, on the Dwadashi day, when I'm doing my sun salutation, I notice that when I do the arching of the back, there is more giddy sensation. There is the lightheaded feeling. So I need to be extra careful at those times. So what are the guidelines and what should I watch out for? If we know ahead of time, that will be very helpful. And yes, for spondylitis, etc., we can modify the postures. For example, for spondylitis, especially you have to be very careful with the cervical segment of the spine. When we do Bhujangasana, for example, the cobra posture, it is not needed to engage the vertebrae of the neck, the cervical part of the spine. So engage just the thoracic vertebrae, lumbar vertebrae, but not the neck region. So like that, we can modify the postures.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kirtiji, you may ask.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Shriramji. Excellent session as always. My question was, in fact, that doubt just arose in my mind when you spoke that there needs to be a cleansing before we do any yoga abhyasa. For women in sensitive monthly cycle, is there any restriction regarding mantra chanting or any of the posture? I wanted to know.
Yes, in fact, in the tradition of Krishnamacharya, so what he used to recommend for women students is to take rest during those times.
Okay.
Take rest during those times. And especially, for example, the practices of inversions should be avoided. Like even in the sun salutation, there are a few inversion practices, such as the forward bend, the padhastasana, the level of the head is below the level of the heart. But beyond that, in general, the guideline that he used to give was to take rest during the time.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Shriramji. Thank you, Kirtiji. Shriramji, we can do the Aadithya Hrudayam chanting. We'll all follow along with you.
Thank you so much, everyone. So before I chant the Aadithya Hrudayam, I am really grateful for the opportunity to share about Surya Namaskara with everyone here. And I really appreciate your eagerness and enthusiasm. And one of the objectives of this session is perhaps some of us here are inspired to invite the practice of Surya Namaskara in our daily life. So it was a little sales pitch about Surya Namaskar. And I hope it works, because to do a complete exercise doesn't require dedicating an hour of our time. We can start small. Even one round of Surya Namaskara, 2 to 3 minutes, it exercises all parts of the body. So there is no excuse not to take care of ourselves, take care of the body, the mind, etc. So I encourage all of us to experiment with this practice. See how it affects the body and mind. What are the benefits that you see? And it's such an amazing way, especially as we enter the yoga day. Perhaps it's a very auspicious time to begin the practice of yoga. In fact, my teacher, he used to start yoga batches of students on the 2 solstice days and the 2 equinox days. So June 21st, September 21st, December 21st, and March 21st. So June 21st, yoga day. So it's a very good time to begin the practice of yoga.
And we are so fortunate to have you teach us on Yoga Day and get us all started, Shriramji. We are all looking forward to it. Thank you so much for giving us your time on the first day and today. And also, I know Yoga Day is going to be a very busy day for you. I know you've taken off from work that day in order to accommodate all kinds of requests from different groups of people. We really thank you very much for making time for our group. Thank you, Shriram.
Thank you.
Sorry,
I really look forward to it.
Excuse me, doctor. The reason I asked is that, I'm not supposed to bend forward. So in Surya Namaskaram, when we touch down, I will strain my lower back. So can I avoid that one step and then do the others? Is there any method of doing that? That's the reason I asked, actually. Because
yes, in fact,
I had
you can avoid that posture,
which led me to little lumbar spondylitis, which my physician said that no front bending and be careful of that. So I've noticed in yoga there is more of front stretching.
It's best to avoid that.
Yeah. So is there any
ways in which we can get around that?
There are, okay. And I heard that Chandra Namaskaram will help for lumbar and spondylitis. And is it true?
Chandra Namaskar. So in Chandra Namaskar, in moon salutation, there is a little more emphasis on gentle back bends, not so much on forward bends.
Yes,
and also, unlike the Surya Namaskara, the Chandra Namaskara is not a standard practice. Each school of yoga, each tradition of yoga, they have very, very different version of the moon salutation. Whereas sun salutation is more standard. So moon salutation, so different traditions, different yoga schools, they give a very different spin around the moon salutation. The version that I learned from my teacher has 22 postures in the moon salutation, 22 postures. So there are many other versions as well. So yes, moon salutation has a name such as moon, a more gentler version of the practice.
Thank you.
Thank you. In fact, when I was studying with my teacher, so in every class, because we used to start very early in the morning, 5 a.m. And we start with a little puja and then chanting of the Aadithya Hrudayam. We always used to chant the Aadithya Hrudayam. And then we used to begin with the Surya Namaskara practice. So this is very nostalgic for me. And so reciting the Aadithya Hrudayam is another very great opportunity for me to really connect with the yoga experience. So I will chant the Aadithya Hrudayam. Om Tato yuddha parishrantam samare chintaya sthitam Ravanam chagrato društva yuddhaya samupasthitam Daivataischa samagamya drashtumabhyagatoranam Upagamya bravidramam agastyo bhagavan rishih Rama Rama Mahabaho Shunuguhyam Sanatanam Yena Sarva Narin Vatsa Samare Vijayishyasi Aditya Hrudayam Punyam Sarva Shatru Vinashanam Jayavaham Japen Nityam Akshayam Paramam Shivam Sarva Mangala Mangalyam Sarva Papa Pranashanam Chinta Shoka Prashamanam Ayurvardhanamuttamam Rashmi Mantam Samudyantam Deva Suranamaskritam Puja Yasva Vivaswantam Bhaskaram Bhuvaneshwaram Sarva Devatmako Hyesha Tejasvi Rashmi Bhavanaha Esha Deva Suraganan Lokan Patigabhastibihi Esha Brahma Cha Vishnushcha Shivaskanda Prajapatihi Mahendro Dhanadakkalo Yamas Somo Hyapampatihi Pitaro Vasavasadhya Hashvinau Maruto Manuhu Vayurvannih Prajaprana Rutukarta Prabhakaraha Aditya Savita Surya Kagah Pusha Gabhastiman Suvarna Sadrisho Bhanur Hiranya Reta Divakaraha Haridashva Sahasrarchis Sapta Saptir Marichiman Timironmathana Shambhuhu Twashta Martanda Amshuman Hiranyagarbha Shishiraha Tapano Bhaskaro Ravihi Agnigarbho Adite Putra Shankha Shishiranashanaha Vyomanathastamo Bedi Rigyajusama Paragaha Ghana Vrishtirapam Mitra Vindhya Viti Plavangamaha Atapi Mandali Mrityuh Pingala Sarvatapanaha Kavir Vishwa Mahateja Rakta Sarva Bhavodbhavaha Nakshatra Grihataranam Adhipo Vishwa Bhavanaha Tejasamapi Tejasvi Dwadashan Mannamostute Namah Purvaya Giraye Paschimayadraye Namaha Jyotirgananam Pataye Dinadhipataye Namaha Jaya Jaya Bhadraya Haryashvaya Namo Namaha Namo Namah Sahasramsho Adityaya Namo Namaha Nama Ugraya Viraya Sarangaya Namo Namaha Nama Padma Prabodhaya Martandaya Namo Namaha Brahmeshanaচ্যুতেশায় Suryayaditya Varchase Bhasvate Sarva Bhakshaya Raudraya Vapushe Namaha Tamoghnaya Himaghnaya Shatrughnaya Mitatmane Kritaghnaghnaya Devaya Jyotisham Pataye Namaha Taptachami Karabhaya Vannaye Vishvakarmane Namastamo Ruchaye Lokasakshine Nashayatyesha Vaibhutam Tadeva Sritati Prabhu Payatyesha Tapatyesha Varshatyesha Gabastibihi Yesha Supteshu Jagarti Bhuteshu Parinishthitaha Esha Yevagnihotram Cha Phalam Chaivagnihottrinam Vedaschakrutavaschaiva Kratunam Phalamevacha Yani Krityani Lokeshu Sarvayesha Ravi Prabhu Yena Mapatsu Kritcheshu Kantareshu Bhayeshu Cha Kirtayan Purusha Kaschin Navasi Datti Raghavaha Pujayasvaina Mekagro Deva Devam Jagatpatim Etat Trigunitam Japtva Yuddheshu Vijayishyasi Asmin Kshane Mahabaho Ravanam Tvam Vadishyasi Eva Muktva Tadagastyo Jagamachayata Gatam Etat Shrutva Mahateja Nashta Shoko Bhavattada Dharayamasa Suprito Raghava Prayatatmavan Adityam Preksha Jatvatu Param Harshamavaptavan कृराचम्य शुचिर्भूत्वा धनुरादाय वीर्यवान् रावणं प्रेक्ष्य हृष्टात्मा युद्धाय समुपागमत् सर्वयत्नेन महता वधे तस्य धृतोऽभवत् अथ रविरवदन् निरीक्ष्य रामं मुदितमनः परमं प्रहृष्यमाणः निशिचरपति संशयं विदित्वा सुरगणमध्यगतो वचस्वरेति ॐ आदित्य हृदयं सम्पूर्णम्.
Thank you so much, Sriramji. ధన్యవాదములు.
Dhanyavada. And thank you all for your enthusiasm. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.